Welcome, everybody. This is Mr. Storm, and today we are going to talk about tables and forms. Tables are extremely helpful for organizing information properly, and forms are very valuable when we want to give our user or the visitor of our website some ability to interact with the website in some way, whether it's logging into the website or it's filling out contact information or whatnot. So let's talk about tables very quickly. Tables in HTML, they look and they function essentially the same way they do in Microsoft Word. When you create a table, you have columns, and columns go up and down, and you have rows, rows go left and right, and you can put information in the individual cells, which is the intersection of the column and the row. You put information in those cells, and that information can actually be organized in kind of a block format. So let's actually do that right now. I want to create a table element, and that table is going to have a couple of rows and a couple columns. Let's say 3 rows and 3 columns. All right, so inside the table element, what I need to do is I need to figure out what my table rows and my table columns are going to look like, right? And so usually it's best if you draw this out, or sometimes it's not very helpful to visualize it, but you could draw it out. You could create a table in Microsoft Word and then kind of remember, figure it out this way. But here's the way it works, right? So the each row is indicated by a table row element, right? And so let's say I want 3 rows. So I want 3 table row elements. Okay, so I have 3 table row elements, and inside each table row, I will have a table data element for each column. So this first row, let's say I want 3 columns, or let's say 4 columns. Let's do 4 columns. Not TC, TD. That is a table data element. And the first table data element in my first row is going to be the top left-hand corner of the table. Top left, right? The next table data element inside this row is going to create a new column, right? Table data elements create new columns, right? And I said I wanted 4 of them, so all right, so now I have 4 columns and I have information in the top row of my 4 columns. On the next row, I would want 4 table data elements as well, right? And actually, this is where we can just start copying and pasting some stuff. So I will copy that, paste that here, right? And we can say this is, this is the second row, right? And then on the third row, we would just have the same thing. We would have, 4 columns. Okay, so this is our table, right? And again, it's kind of hard to imagine what it would look like, but essentially the way it works is this is the first piece of information. Then if we go to the right one cell, this will be the next piece of information. And then if we go to the right one cell, this will be the next, and then this will be the last piece of information on that top row, right? And then if we go to the next row, we'll have the same thing. This is going to be the second piece of information down on the very left-hand side. This will be to the next one in sequence, the next one, and the next one. And then if we go to the last row, this is the bottom on the left-hand side. This is the next in the sequence. This is it. And then this is the bottom of the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's save it as, because this is a new document. And sure, I'll just put it in my website. Example. Save, and then I'll go ahead and open that up let's go here, website. Let's open up that example and see what our table looks like. Okay, there we go. Now it's not so great looking, right? We have our top left. Let's pull this over here. So we have our top left here. Oh, there we go. So we can see the table data next to the table. So this is the top left here, right? This right here where it says this is a new column, that's right there. This right here where it says this is the third, that's right there. And then this is the last column is going to be right there. And then we have our second row, which is right here. And we have the new column, third column, last column. And then down here, this is the bottom left, new column, third column, last column. So that's how we enter information into a table. Now this table looks kind of gross, right? It's there are no borders around it. There's no lines separating the items in the table. It's just structured this way, right? What we could do is we can actually change that. We can add a border around the table so that it makes it look a little bit nice. So let's add a border here. Let's go up to our table element here. And let's say style equals border. And let's go back and see what happened there. Nothing. I think I have to indicate, I have to indicate that it is style equals border, I think 1 pixel. I think I have to do that. Let's do border equals 1 pixel solid black. I think that's how you do it, but I don't know. If I didn't do it right, then we will find out in just a second. And I didn't do it right. Perfect. Okay. Well, you know what? This is something that we are going to do, that we are going to play around with when we get into CSS next term. So let's actually focus on doing that next term instead of playing around with it right now. Right now our table is just going to look gross. And you know what? That actually matches with the entire theme of the first term, which is we're just building the stuff. We're not going to worry about what it looks like. So we'll leave that alone. One thing I do want to point out for formatting though, is let's say this top row is like the header of your table. Let's say up here you have like name, age, address, and we'll put in like phone number. Phone number, right? Let's say you wanted that to actually be separate from the rest of the information, meaning you wanted this to be like bold and centered, so it's easy to see that this is not information. This is just the column headers, right? What we could do is instead of indicating that these are sorry, instead of indicating that this is table data, we can say it's a table header, th. And table headers will format themselves cleanly, so it's easy to distinguish the headers from the data in the table, right? So let's do that real quick and see what that looks like. And all I'm doing is replacing all the D's with H's in this top row. Save, and let's go back to our web page. So now you can see the top row of our table has actual, headers in them, and it's easy to see that those are the headers for the column, or for each column. Okay, perfect. All right, so tables are fun. Definitely play around with the examples that in CSS, or sorry, in W3 W3 schools, because those examples are really great, and it'll help you to format your tables properly and make them look really nice. I'm going to skip down here to forms, because forms, that's the second half of your assignment. Forms are incredibly powerful. And these are the kind of things, forms are something you're probably not going to use too often on a website, just because it's rare that you're going to be building a website where someone needs to log in, or where you need to give them like a place to enter contact information. Mostly, and I'm speaking like you're building websites just for fun. Mostly, you're just going to be building websites to make some cool looking web pages. You're probably not going to be including forms, but it's important to understand how they work, because when you get into actual web development as a career, almost every website these days has some form of login area where you need to type in a password, a username or a password, and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you know how to structure a form, how to put a form together. And the way you do that is you create a form element, and inside that form element you add input type elements. So for example, let's say in my form element, I want you to enter your first name. And then, I'm going to put a break here so that it goes to the next line. And I'm going to put input type, and let's do a text input type. And I'll put another break here so it goes to the next line. And let's say, we could do last name. Input type equals text. Okay, now an input type is going to be what the input type basically describes what is going to be inside your form. So far I have two pieces of text saying first name and last name, and then below those I have text fields where the user can enter their information. They can enter their first name or enter their last name. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like on our web page. Oh. So right here, right, I have first name and then I have two text input fields. If you want users to enter a word, a word or a couple of words, then you would want to use an input type text. Let's look at some other input types we could use though. Let's say gender, and we'll do a break there. And for gender, let's use radio button, right? Because you're one gender or you're another or you're a mix or whatever, whatever you identify as far as gender. But let's say we have an input type and it's going to be radio. Now with a radio input field, we need to actually give it a name. And the reason we need to give it a name is because we need to link all the options in our input type together so that our radio button knows how to work. I'll show you what this means in just a minute. So I'm going to give it a name equals, we'll say gender. And the value of this option is going to be male. And it's going to say male right there. We actually don't need value right now. You'll get into that when you get into PHP scripting and stuff like that, but you don't need it right now. And then I will give it a break. And we're going to take the same statement here. I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to keep the input type and the name the same. And I'm going to say female. Oh, spelled female wrong. Female. And then we'll do the same down here. And we'll say it is other, right? And I'm going to save that. And let's go to our web page and see what that looks like. So now I have a gender section, and I have male, female, or other. And notice that when I click one, it deselects the other one that I had clicked, right? That's why we had our radio buttons with the same name, because this is a field of radio buttons that are all linked together by their name. And that name means that any radio buttons that have that are in the same name category, you cannot select multiples at the same time. So let's actually change the name. Let's do a new set of radio buttons and let's change the name to, I don't know, gender 1, just so it's different. And let's save that and see what happens here. So now I have two sets of gender buttons, and I can actually select two different genders if I wanted to, because I have two sets. But notice that in this bottom set, if I click male, it deselects other. And up at this top set, if I click, other, it deselects female. But I can select from two different sets. That's why we have different names in our radio buttons. All right, let's look at another input type. Let's talk about checkboxes, because checkboxes are really important. It's another input type that you may use at some point. Checkboxes will give you the option to click as many of the options as you want, right? And they're literally the same as a radio button. So input type, and instead of radio, it's checkbox. And you're going to give it a name because you want a set of checkboxes. And you'll say, name equals, I don't know, what do we want this to be? Let's say, I don't know. Let's say cars, sure. And this first car is going to be Pontiac. And let's grab a couple of these. Boom. And we'll do Ford, Chevy, and Toyota. And up here we'll say, which of these do you own? And break. Now, the reason we're using a checkbox for this is because you can own more than one car. I can have a Chevy and a Toyota, and so I need to be able to check both of those options instead of using a radio button for that, right? So I would need to be able to check both options. Let's see what that looks like. So down here, which of these do you own? I own a Pontiac and a Chevy. Oh, and I own a Ford as well, right? So I can check as many of these or as little of these as I want, right? So that's what a checkbox set does for you. Now, every form, every good form at least, should have a button at the bottom that allows you to click the button and do something with it, right? So every form should have a submit button at the bottom. Well, for that, all we're going to do is create an input type equals submit, right? And for that, that's just going to create a button that allows us to submit our form. Now, because we're not going into server-side scripting in this class, and because we're not actually going to, determine how to send information, collect this information, and send it to a database on the server and store it and whatnot, we're not going to get into making this button actually work. We're just going to, have it there on the form because you need to have it, right? So anyway, that's forms. It's pretty easy, right? To create a form, you just have to know what input type you want to use. And again, it all goes inside the form element right here. And as long as it's inside the form element, it should work properly. If you have any questions with this stuff can be a little hinky, especially when it comes to the table, because you have to kind of mentally visualize where everything's supposed to go. But if you get confused, come ask me, come talk to me. Go through the examples or the pages I've given you to on W3 Schools. Do their exercises. It should help you figure out what you're doing. But I'm always here to help if you get stuck. So I will see you next time. Thanks for paying attention.